Hi, this is Tamsen Granger.
This is Dan Abuhoff.
With Tamsen and Dan Read the Paper. It is Sunday, March 24th, 2019. And first and foremost, we have to remember Fleur Abuhoff. This would be her birthday.
Her 92nd birthday.
Only 90 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay, just a kid she would have been.
No, 90. Ooh, how I got that wrong. 1926, she would have been 93.
Okay. It's good that you're in charge of the math.
Yeah.
And the arithmetic.
Yeah. There we go.
And, but today, we have a special guest.
We do.
And that would be Pam Bourg, who is
Pam Bourg. Yeah, okay.
the matriarch of a family, of an important family in our lives. She is related to a lot of our favorite people, including the lovely Noelle.
It's the mother of Noelle Bourg. Let's
Yes.
put it on the line. Let's get right to it.
But don't forget about all the others.
Yeah, all the others are of
Chuck
some interest.
and
They're of
Dominique and
some
Zavi
interest.
and...
No.
Oh, no.
She is here for one main reason. She is Noelle Bourg's mother, right? Isn't that the key reason?
No, she's here because she's podcast gold.
Well, it turns out
which
she's podcast gold.
our audience will find out
Exactly.
in a moment.
All right.
But say hello, Pam.
Hi, everyone.
There we go. That's enough.
And she can say other things.
Go ahead. Keep going. Go ahead, Pam. Come on.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. We're going to hear more from Pam in just a second. Because we have to lead off, before we forget, with what we saw this week, which is I Married an Angel on Thursday at City Center, as we previewed last week, which is the City Center's Encores. And I was started to discuss with Pam before, Encores being that series that we subscribe to. There are 3 plays a year. They're really concert performances. They're revivals of plays which really don't merit a full revival. That's why just a concert performance. And is this something that didn't merit a revival or what? Because it wasn't so great, which is too bad, because Encores is usually very good, right?
I went on record saying I was not looking forward to it.
Congratulations. We were, in retrospect, I'm not looking for it. Was just to set the stage.
You know, I'm not sure they even tried.
Well, let's be clear what it's about. Let me give a little background before we go at it. But it was a 1938 play or so. Rodgers and Hart. It was toward the end of their partnership. They were writing at that point 3 or 4 plays a year. They were pretty much expanded reviews, but they were just pumping it out. They were very popular, apparently, at the time. A Married Angel is a story about a fellow who marries an angel, believe it or not. And it turns out that that's a mixed blessing, because an angel has all kinds of characteristics that are not consistent with normal human behavior, including that scrupulously honest, not diplomatic, difficult to deal with for third parties, and all kinds of difficulties arise as a result of marrying an angel. Who knew? So it stars Sarah Mearns she's a ballerina, and she's an accomplished ballerina. She's brought into this production to do a lot of dancing and to act in a musical comedy. And it's directed and choreographed by her husband, a fellow named Josh Bergassi. Now, go ahead. Doesn't work, right?
Doesn't work. I'm not sure it ever worked.
Right.
Looked to me like Rodgers and Hart, and I am a Rodgers and Hart fan, but it looked to me like they were not pumping it out so much as phoning it in.
Really?
It really, the songs, the memorable songs don't make any sense to the story. I'm not even going to go into depth on the story because, I don't think they cared about the story.
Yes.
It really, I think it's kind of a blessing because it does say to the world that not so great being married to an angel. And it kind of, so that it kind of endorses non-angels like myself.
Yes.
As possible good marriage partners.
I thought you told me when we watched it. It was like watching my own life story. I Married an Angel. But going back to the production itself.
That was a little tongue-in-cheek.
I got it. The production itself was not good. There were moments in that reminded me, not so much of other plays we've seen on Broadway, but of middle school productions in Cranberry, where some 8th grader forgot her lines, and there's like an awkward pause on stage, and you're going, what? I mean, it was that kind of dead air. It was just bad. It was just crazily bad.
Jokes were not landing.
It was awful.
And you know what?
What?
I mean, I don't know anything about choreography.
It was terrible.
But it looked terrible. It looked like
terrible.
one of those things where one of those talent shows
Yeah.
where the fifth grader just kind of flitters about,
Yeah.
pretending to dance.
Listen, there's
on
nothing.
stage.
Look, there's nothing constructive that comes out of
I don't
this
know,
sort
broke
of
my
dumping
heart.
on us.
Broke my
It was
heart.
just a weekend performance. We still believe in encores. We still think you should go. You take a chance. It works 9 times out of 10. Tam's reminded me before that I've been giving the wrong figures for the ticket prices. Sometimes you can get them as low as $35 or $40. Keep your eyes open. This
If anybody
didn't work.
paid $75 for that show, they got ripped off.
Oof. All right. Now I hope we got that out of our system as we go back to our guest who has patiently listened to this.
So Pam came east.
So Pam, tell us why you're here.
I came to New Jersey through Newark Airport to talk to Rutgers University's College of Nursing tomorrow, Monday morning at 11 o'clock. And I'm going to be addressing Nursing's Call to Action, the marijuana journey after legislation of legal marijuana in the state of Colorado, and what implications for the future for New Jersey should they pass the law this year in their legislature.
And Pam is speaking to this.
Because Pam is a trauma nurse. Is that a fact?
I am a trauma nurse. I direct the trauma programs in Colorado for Centura Health. And we have had lots of experience with marijuana since its legalization and caring for trauma patients who use marijuana.
So what kind of implications are there?
The implications are really that these patients who come in after their trauma and who are regular users have to be medicated differently than those who do not use marijuana because the receptors in their brain that help to modulate pain are affected by recreational use and chronic use of marijuana.
Right. And so this becomes part of the history that's taken when a patient
That's
comes
part
in.
of the history, and pre the legalization, people were reluctant to let us know about utilization of illicit drugs, as it was known before it became legal. And now, 4 years later, after the legislation, people are much more apt to tell us that they're users, and it allows us to care for them better because we can utilize other synthetic drugs that will provide the pain relief that they need, especially after their traumatic injuries.
So in other words, there are certain drugs you would not use with somebody who had recently
Smoked a bowl, as they say on
Yeah.
the hill, of marijuana, or after they've had their brownies at the end of the ski day. And so we medicate them differently, and we are able to provide relief of their injury in which they accomplished, as we call it, at the hospital air in the terrain parks, and they come crashing down, literally and figuratively, and become our patients.
Well, you were, and this took us to a broader discussion of the benefits and perhaps deficits of using marijuana. And you were telling us that the therapeutic benefits of marijuana are pretty well recognized.
I think they're becoming more recognized, and I think that's probably some of the important benefits. Colorado became a mecca. We had the Colorado Rush, especially after it was found out that infants who suffered from seizures could benefit from the oils that were compounded down for these infants, and were able to provide relief, so much so that families moved their entire lives to Colorado in order to be able to procure the utilization of this medication when it was still medicinally used, and it's medicinally available here in New Jersey, and so people don't have to move across the country for it. It's also been utilized and very helpful in patients who are suffering from dementia. And especially in regards to their anxiousness and agitation that they sometimes can experience. And it's also good for the over 65 crowd that craves their warrior and athletics lifestyles.
What are you looking at me for? Is that for the marijuana use or the warrior lifestyle?
Oh, the warrior lifestyle.
I see.
The warrior lifestyle.
Wait a minute, is that to recover from the warrior?
Yeah, I think I know exactly. Go ahead, let the woman finish her sentence. Go ahead.
And so really it's the topical creams that can be made out of the TBD oils, which also can be extracted from hemp. But it's the THC, just a small percentage thereof, that probably helps to provide some of the relief. Some believe, that's my belief. And that over 65 crowd is one of the fastest growing users, certainly in the state of Colorado, and I think once it becomes legalized in New Jersey, we'll also become part of that fastest growing crowd.
All right, so
Look at me again.
Now the hemp derived CBD, is that CBD?
Yeah.
CBD.
Okay, so CBD doesn't contain THC.
Right.
Okay, which is the
Hallucinogenic.
aspect.
Yeah.
Of
Right. And we've talked about the CBD previously.
Right.
But
right.
but you're saying
but you are saying that there are specific that there are certain medicinal aspects of THC not available in
CBD.
the CBD.
Correct.
And not only and that's available in New Jersey, but you need
a
a
prescription.
prescription for it.
But we may see more use for medicinal purposes, self-medication.
Yes.
In other words, there are other uses of marijuana
uses will
besides
clearly
recreational.
Increase. Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, I think that
will be available.
But
to people
in
if that
fairness,
goes.
you did say before people go crazy that there are some potentially detrimental effects of marijuana, particularly for younger people. I think we were talking about learning and the like.
And I think habitual use of marijuana, especially in adolescence, is not good because it's known to affect brain development. And those individuals, especially if they use them for long, protracted periods of time, become regular users, could in fact have their potentials altered and really off the beaten track in terms of being able to learn as best they could, during that really important period of their lives when they're gaining education and gaining life skills.
Right. Yeah. So the adolescent brain is significantly different from the adult. Right. It's vulnerable to those impacts. The other thing we discussed that I thought was worth mentioning is that the amount of THC in legalized marijuana can be significantly higher.
It is.
So that changes the effect on the bodies. Nurses need to be aware of that.
Right, correct. And if we were at
the dispensary,
the if you want to call it the tenders, the people that guide you towards what kind of marijuana you would like, they can tell you the percentage of marijuana that's contained in those products. And one of the things that is definitely true is that if you smoked in the 60s or the 70s, the percentage of THC was at 4%. If you smoke now, that percentage is considerably higher. And some people say as high as 40%. Probably most of the stuff that's being sold legally in California, Colorado, Washington, Oregon is probably anywhere from 25 to 30%.
So that's something.
So there is a paucity of information and research regarding what that means.
Well, one thing I did ask you is whether what Colorado's experience was in terms of marijuana, but in particular, when I asked you whether, in fact, there have been more in the way of accidents, car accidents, let's say, because of young people using marijuana. Your answer surprised me a little bit, but didn't surprise Tamsen, of course. And you said, your answer was no. It's because it's some other reason.
It's because of distracted driving and cell phones, and that they have not been able to establish causality between increase in motor vehicle crashes in the state of Colorado with the legalization of marijuana because of distracted driving.
Yeah, you can't differentiate. Were they distracted because they were high, or were they distracted because they're texting and answering the phone, etc.
And some of the research that I'll present tomorrow morning in Rutgers is actually, we've shown a higher percentage of people that have been injured as auto pedestrians. And we don't know, again, if it's marijuana or the distraction of the person on the telephone that's walking across the street.
Right, staring at the phone.
Staring at the phone.
Looking at the traffic.
So by coincidence, there's an article in, what is it in the article? It's in the Times this weekend called "Bring Back the Stick Shift." And you might say to yourself, what could that possibly have to do with what we're talking about? And what this person says, it's an opinion article of a person named Vatsal Thakkar. And the thesis of the article is that there are a lot of crashes and vehicular problems caused by distraction. And the only way to change that is to make sure the driver is fully engaged And the way to do that is to cause people to be fully engaged by driving with a stick shift as opposed to an automatic. And this person...
Doesn't he propose getting rid of all the random aids in the car? Like the warnings for your blind spot?
He's not getting rid of any... Well, he's not saying you should get rid of anything so much as he's saying that as it now stands, when you get into your car, and we get into our car, there are so many warning bells and whistles about this car coming to your left, you're getting close to something from behind you when you're parking, that sort of thing, and you come to lean on it and expect it, rely on it, and you don't pay attention by looking out the window as much as you should. And that contributes to this whole idea. And looking at your phone would contribute to it. He also talks about you shouldn't be eating in the car, all kinds of things people do in the car.
Let's be clear here.
Yes.
You don't use the phone while you're driving at all.
That's correct.
But you have never really bothered
Careful.
to look around. You're not terribly engaged while you're driving. In driving.
I don't know about that.
I don't think stick shift is going to help, Daniel.
I've driven a stick shift, and I've had
once.
I've driven a stick shift and automatic. I like to say I'm successful with both, really. So to me, I'm open to anything. But this person says that it's counterproductive, and I don't think it's a serious suggestion because he doesn't see it happening. As a matter of fact, he's kind of miffed that the car he's been driving, I guess it's an Audi, is discontinuing stick shift completely. And a lot of cars have discontinued stick shift completely.
Well, we have several friends,
yeah,
Kathy Easton and Lisa Walsh, who will only drive stick shift.
Because they're distracted by marijuana use, or what is it?
I didn't really, I don't know. But, one of their problems is, if you go to park in the city,
yeah,
or you go to a lot,
yeah,
valet parking.
Because
not all those kids
really
who do the valet
That's
parking can drive stick shift.
That will grind your gears in a
bad
way. Yeah.
Some of them hop in the seat and say, well, I've always wanted to try.
Oh, my God. Well, it's serious. I mean, this person is trying to make a serious point, and they actually use the example of the recent Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircrafts as saying the way that the technology has kind of done a disservice, that it's correction upon correction upon correction, and the pilot's put in a difficult situation and is kind of not paying attention to, in this case, was an overcorrection where the software was putting the nose down further than it should have to correct for the fact that the engines are too far up in the airplane, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, look, there's nothing better than the brain. No artificial intelligence is better than the brain for seeing everything that's going on and making adjustments for even unexpected things that happen.
Really?
And that's why you can't be distracted.
I don't know about that.
And nothing better than
I think we can have better training to utilize all these things and still have the human backup.
Yeah.
Well,
you're not going to see stick shifts anytime soon. But the idea of not being distracted...
That just sounds like cranky old man stuff to me.
I'm all for
I want the good old days.
They didn't give the age
when
of the
we
guy
had
who wrote
the
the
stick
article.
shift.
Maybe they should put the age of the writer of all these articles so you can really bear down on the cranky old man aspect. It could be 28
you know
years
what?
old.
You can have a 28-year-old cranky old man.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, trust me.
Oh, my God.
I've known some.
All right. Speaking of which, there's another article. It's a legal article. So, the legal stuff, I know people like sit up straight and kind of interested in this. Right? And that is the dispute between Anheuser-Busch on the one hand and Miller on the other over the corn syrup thing. You saw it in the Super Bowl, Anheuser-Busch, Bud Light, rolled out these ads which criticized Miller for use of corn syrup. And the way they did it was it would be some kind of faux delivery of corn syrup that went to Bud instead of to Miller, and the Bud folks were going to bring it to Miller because Bud doesn't use it. It's horrible to use corn syrup. Only Miller uses it. And that's caused a big dispute because it's kind of misleading. As a matter of fact, it is misleading. In that, for two reasons. Number one is Miller does use corn syrup because you need some kind of sweetener to do the fermentation process, but by the time the beer is delivered, there's no corn syrup there. And number two is that the real thing that's objectionable is a high fructose corn syrup. That's the thing that gets people concerned. There's no such product used in the beer. As for Anheuser-Busch and their beer, they use rice instead of corn syrup. But again, it's a sweetener. It's not too different. It's using a fermentation process. So what the Bud folks are doing is taking advantage of a distinction without a difference, and you can see why Miller's riled up.
Distinction without a difference. Is that a legal term?
Yeah, and also in certain high-tone places they talk like that. But yes, but what's important to me is that when we describe the situation, to Pam, she immediately said, well, what does Coors have to do with this? And of course, that's what Pam would say because Pam's from Colorado.
Right.
And she sees it that way. It's not an interesting beer issue unless Coors is involved. So we had to look up and determine, am I making this up, Pam?
No.
And we had to determine that, in fact, Miller is called Miller Coors, so that they're in the fight no matter what. But the other thing that surprised both of you, I think, but tell me if I got it wrong, that the reason that this dispute is almost poignant, really, is because the beer companies were just on the verge of getting together to fight a much bigger problem in the industry, which is that beer consumption as a whole is down. The younger people are not drinking beer.
See, I don't really understand that because beer seems much more prominent as a beverage in many restaurants that we go to now.
Well,
there are craft beers.
I mean, is that your sense too?
Well, all I know is that Sarah Jessica Parker from Sex and the City is now in a Stella Artois commercial on TV.
But that proves my point. They're desperate now to bring in these. And but
you're spending the big bucks.
I mean, all your stories on skiing and beer must go together. It must be
skiing and beer goes together for sure.
Yeah. So and yet I can tell you statistically, there's no question about it that beer consumption
is that because they're all at the dispensaries.
It could be
getting
you're
marijuana instead,
medically, by prescription. But look, I don't really know.
In Colorado, you don't need a subscription.
Listen, the short answer is
maybe
I don't know.
Maybe you need a subscription, but not a prescription.
But I don't know. But the answer is it's clearly down. So much so that there was a proposal that was in the middle of discussion between Bush, Anheuser-Busch, Bud on the one hand, and Miller on the other hand to cooperate in a campaign called Got Beer, which would be like Got Milk. So the companies they were going to cooperate, which is very weird.
Huge.
And this is what blew this whole thing up now. They're going to they took away that initiative. The whole industry is going to suffer as a whole because of this internecine dispute. And there you go. They'll work it out in the courts. So it's
interesting.
An opportunity lost.
Yeah. All right.
Is it? Are we moving? Oh, are we moving on to baseball?
Yes, baseball.
Oh, really much.
Things are getting more and more exciting here.
Oh man, I did.
This is all about altered states. This is the Altered States podcast.
Here. Look.
You need to be in an altered state to appreciate baseball.
All right.
I think that's the way it goes.
So we talked about, I said, well, here's an interesting story about a guy who, just signed a big contract. And Pam jumped in right away. She said, the guy in California, right? Yeah, how big a baseball? We need to ask you. Are you a big baseball fan?
No, not at all.
So how do you know about this?
Because it made all the news.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? Mike Trout. So he signed for $1 zillion. What is it, $430 million?
Yes.
$437 million.
Boy, you really tuned into this.
Well, anybody who makes $437 million. When I tell my son when he was a little boy, you cannot play baseball because I'm never coming to your games.
Really?
And so he had to choose other sports.
Is it your understanding or belief that Chuck would be signing a contract today for $437 million had he not gotten that advice?
Who knows? His mother never let him play.
Let me jump in here with I know, and the answer is probably not, because this is the largest contract ever. But here's what's interesting about it in terms of location. So Mike Trout was from the Philly area, which you may know, or maybe you don't, I don't know. But in any event, he's from the Philly area, so much so that he's a fan of the local teams, the Philadelphia Eagles, big Philadelphia Eagle fan. He happens to play for the California Angels, but he's in the Philly area. So when the Philadelphia Phillies signed, what's his name?
Bryce Harper.
Bryce Harper, there you go. Bryce Harper. They were excited because he's a big talent, but one of the reasons the folks in Philly were excited was he's friends with Mike Trout. So the dream in Philadelphia was then to follow it up next year by signing Mike Trout, the local boy, and they'd have the all-time team. Because Bryce Harper's very good, but Mike Trout is better. Mike Trout is the best in baseball. And what happens is he says, 2 weeks later, Mike Trout says, no, I'm signing and staying in California. And why did he come to this conclusion? Because he's the local boy. He's not coming on to Philadelphia.
The weather is better.
No, it's not the answer. The weather is a good guess. Because the way the Angels sold Mike Trout on this, which I think is interesting and real, and I'd never heard this before, they said to Mike Trout, people talk about going home to play. That's a huge mistake. What you want to do is keep your personal life and your professional life distinct. That's the secret to happiness. If you play in Philadelphia, every time you go home, you go 1 for 4, 0 for 4, you're going to hear about it. You'll never get away from it. Even when you succeed, you're not going to be able to get out
Well,
of your
because
car.
Philly's that kind of place.
It
Philly,
is.
everybody has an opinion,
would-
they'll let you know.
Right, and you'd suffocate in Philadelphia. But think about the great thing: you have this wonderful life in California, in which you're not a super duper store that you can't go to the dry cleaner, but you're appreciated. And then in the off season, you go home, and people nod and respect. They know who Mike Trout is, but you don't have to deal with the hometown thing.
Right.
So I
Plus,
thought
in
that was
California,
great.
I think they're all
Cool.
they're cool. They're on the marijuana. So they're not going to get too riled up.
You're going to bring it into that.
Like the beer drinking Philadelphians. But here's the problem. Here's the problem.
I didn't fully
You know what they
appreciate
do have in California that's
What?
a problem?
What?
All those butterflies.
Oh, well, the butterfly,
Now he's going to have some fancy car, and he's going to have orange goop all over his windshield because the butterflies are out of control.
I don't have
The painted ladies.
The painted ladies.
There are way too many of these painted lady butterflies out
true.
in Anaheim, and it's going to be a problem.
There is, yes, because of the rains.
He's going to wish he was back in Philly
Well, he won't be driving. Or at least, but if he's
with
driving,
the hometown crowd.
But if he does distracted driving in California, when the painted ladies come visit and land on his windshield, it's going to be a disaster. Especially if he's had a few hits with a bowl. Is that the way you described it, Pam?
A bowl. They smoke bowls.
Smoke bowls.
And
Where have you heard this? Where have you heard phraseology like this? No one talks like this.
Okay, because I'm a Colorado girl, and I ski patrol at Copper Mountain, and I'm talking to those boys in the terrain park all the time, and they are telling me what it's like, and I'm getting the lingo from them.
Really?
And giving them the lingo.
Yeah.
Well, that is another one of, not only is she...
We should pause on that.
Not
for
only
a
is she
minute.
the head of trauma for the Western universe,
Right.
or hemisphere or whatever, she's on ski patrol.
She's on ski patrol.
Which is amazing to us.
The woman's on guard every second.
Because we can barely, cross-country ski across the driveway.
That's right.
So the idea
And
that
Pam,
someone can
Pam is almost our
zip
age.
around
is
and
it fair to
save
say that Pam is
lives
almost our age? Can we
on
say
ski-
that?
I can say that I'm older than you.
No, don't say that. She's almost our age, and she's on ski patrol, and you're still out there patrolling. Although
Correct.
You told us that the season this year is going to last in April. For you.
It will go. No, we're gonna ski into May this year. I mean, even the Arapahoe Basin, one of the highest ski areas in the United States, always goes to 4th of July. Now, some of the other ones that are at lower altitude will be going through the end of May. They've already announced, because the snow has been so phenomenal this
And
year.
you'll be making these hair-raising rescues all the way into...
Not at Copper Mountain. We're closing at the usual time because they're building even newer, higher lifts.
Wow.
So out there to the Bourg family, Tucker Mountain, no longer will have to hike. You'll be able to catch the chair to the top of Tucker Mountain.
This is, I'm sorry, Copper Mountain?
Tucker is on Copper.
So wasn't Copper Mountain one of the first to have lights at night? Or
No, it's Keystone. We have no night skiing.
Oh, no, okay. I
night
remember
skiing.
it backwards. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tamsen and I went to Breckenridge once or twice.
Breckenridge is a pretty cool place, and they're going to ski till the end of May
Yeah.
Really?
at Breckenridge this year.
Okay, so there we go.
We had a ton of fun there.
Yes,
but
we did.
moving
But
right along.
We're not ski
All
patrol
right,
qualified.
because, I'm a health nut, as we know. Not like the rest of you. I have a couple of
Yes.
food-oriented obits.
Yes. People
this
passed
week.
away.
Paul Talalay, I don't know how really to pronounce it, died at the age of 95. And he was best known as a medical researcher at Johns Hopkins University for 50 years. And he is the guy who... 4 decades ago, when nearly all cancer research was focused on finding cures, he was a pioneer in searching for means of prevention. And he was convinced that he wrote a paper in 1992 finding a chemical obtained from eating broccoli and some other vegetables, sulforaphane, and he was convinced that could boost the body's natural defenses against carcinogens.
Okay.
And so he's why we all go crazy eating broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables now. More than a quarter century after his 1992 paper, it still isn't clear which vegetables are most effective in fighting cancer and other diseases, or in what forms and quantities they should be eaten. nonetheless, we all kind of believe in that, don't we?
We do.
Yeah, we do. And, he spent many years doing this research. He also founded a company with his son and a fellow researcher selling some things. Like, it seems that broccoli sprouts had the highest concentration of this chemical that they felt would reduce your propensity to cancer. But they couldn't really sell it. It was attractive to kind of a hippie crowd, they called it. But other than that...
Well, how did it taste?
I don't know, but it's those little sprouty things. And I don't think most of our diets...
it can't taste worse than broccoli. How bad?
No, but it's not about... I don't think it was so much a matter of taste as, your comfort or in using it.
Okay.
Okay, it wasn't something people... To this day, not everybody throws sprouts in their salad or in their, various recipes. So it just didn't get off the ground. So thank you, Paul Talalay, for, encouraging us to eat broccoli. And then... I have to dedicate this obituary to Sadie, because this obituary, Charles Sana, and he was 101 when he passed away March 13th, was basically the inventor of Swiss Miss, the instant cocoa mix that Sadie still swears by.
What's as good for you as broccoli, as far as my understanding?
Well, he probably felt it was. He was involved in a dairy product. He was a mechanical engineer working for a company that sold powdered milk.
Right.
And there was an excess of powdered milk one year. Largely, they were selling it as to be used as a creamer for coffee. Right. And so somebody got the bright idea of developing this chocolate cocoa mix, which they largely sold for airplanes to use on their flights. And it's an odd story. I don't really follow it. Yeah. But apparently,
I remember.
Their sales went down.
Right, and
he surmised it was because the stewardess. Yeah. On
the staff was stealing.
The staff was stealing.
It was such a fabulous product
on the airplane.
Not because people didn't like it, because the staff. It was so great that the staff was stealing it, and he managed to sell somebody on that thesis, and they went into production and they made money.
Anyway, they started out calling it Brown Swiss.
That was their problem.
Which seems like a terrible name.
I would have never drunk anything.
No. That sounds awful.
Swiss Miss somehow rang the bell. So
so thank you, Charles Sana.
A little broccoli and some Swiss Miss.
And I got to say, the man lived to 101.
Well, yeah.
On the other hand, the broccoli man lived to 93, 95.
Something. Yeah.
So I think either way you go, there must be something there.
It's hard to know. So there is an article, we talked a little bit about, or at least commented on the fact that there is this production of Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish, and it's now on Broadway. We keep saying we're going to see it, and maybe we will. But people say wonderful things about it. And without having thought too hard about it, we kind of assumed that the actors, in particular the star, the fellow who plays Tevye, would be someone who would be from the old country, someone from Eastern Europe, someone who grew up speaking
Or there is Yiddish theater in New York.
Yeah, or old Yiddish
some
theater.
Some kind of underground Yiddish star.
Right. And it turns out that is completely wrong. The star is a fellow named Steven Skybell, and he is from Lubbock, Texas. Lubbock, Texas. Unbelievable.
But he's Jewish, right?
He is Jewish, and he lived in a Jewish enclave in Lubbock, Texas.
Where they all speak Yiddish.
No, they didn't speak Yiddish. No.
So how does he know Yiddish?
Well, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. This is in the category of
not that I think he has to know any Yiddish to do this, right?
Yes, he has to know some.
Singers can fake other languages.
There's dialogue. It's easier if you speak Yiddish. If you speak the language in which you're acting, it's a big advantage. So anyway, the fact of the matter is that he grew up in this Jewish home, but they didn't speak Yiddish. They spoke Yiddish, as I was describing before, the way Yiddish was spoken in my family growing up, which is if the parents or the grandparents did not want the children to understand, they spoke Yiddish. That is not conducive to learning a language if you are the child. And therefore,
when they want to curse you out, they would do it in Yiddish.
That never happened to me. But the fact of the matter is that he So he did not learn Yiddish from his family the same way I didn't learn Yiddish. He may know a few words. He knew a few words, but that doesn't do it. What's weird is, this is his story, is that he grew up, he was interested in musical performance. He got some jobs. He had some success, not great success. But he reached a point in life, and it was in 2005, where he just decided that he was really interested in learning Yiddish. Where this came from, I don't know. He found a teacher at Northwestern, and the class was canceled. He learned a little bit, and then he and his brother pursued it. He worked really hard for no particular reason around 2005, 2006 to learn Yiddish.
He might have been just embracing his heritage.
He might have been. But think of the payoff. Then a few years later, 8 years later, out of the blue, he comes aware of this opportunity. They're doing Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish. Aren't you a musical comedy guy? Don't you know Yiddish? Talk about things falling into place. And then, boom, he gets the part. And even when he gets the part, he says to himself, well, this is nothing. It's just a downtown performance. It's going to attract interest from a small group of people.
Local community group.
Right? And then who do they get as director? Joel Grey. And then what happens? They get a great review in the Times. And then guess what? They're on Broadway. He's on Broadway. It's like, how did this happen? And there he is. Everything fell into place for this guy. So he deserves
Mazel tov.
Oh, there you go. Oh, doesn't get any better than that. We should close on that, but we have one final story, which is almost as good.
This is a fantastic story.
It is, but that was a good line. So here we go. Here we were all amazed at this. All right. Well, to set the stage, Tamsen and I spoke some months ago at being at the Hammerstein farm, and they were celebrating the legacy of Roger and Hammerstein, in particular, focused on the fact that the Hammerstein farm was something that was in need of some restoration. It was where Hammerstein did his work and wrote the lyrics to all those great Roger and Hammerstein musicals, and almost seeking contributions. But there was a single.
Well, they've formed a foundation, and they want to have some kind of ongoing effort to encourage the values and the interest in things dear to Oscar
Hammerstein, which is fair. It was interesting, and some people made contributions, possibly even us. But now, all that effort, I'm sure, has been surpassed by this development. Ariana Grande, some of you may know, and I just knew as a fact, released a song that was very popular, got tremendous play, #1 Billboard song called 7 Rings. Never thought much about it. Was #1 on Billboard for 4 weeks. Again, never thought much about it. That's the kind of thing that happens. And it turns out, unbeknownst to me, because I never listened to it, that it is...
If it's not on the Broadway channel, Dan hasn't heard it.
That's right. But it should have been, because it's based on My Favorite Things. This song, My Favorite Things, from what?
Sound of Music.
Sound of Music. There you go. Sound of Music. Tamsen was just humming. And we played it for a few minutes ago, and to our amazement, it is based on My Favorite Thing. So what happens is, in that situation, because the group behind it, the composers and Ms. Grande, are responsible citizens, they dealt with all stakeholders, and they sat down with the owners of the copyrights on My Favorite
So
Things.
it's still under copyright.
It's still under copyright.
So they have to pay to use...
They have to negotiate some kind of arrangement to use My Favorite Things.
They must have really wanted to...
They must have, because the deal that they negotiated, according to the New York Times, is that the percentage of royalties that goes to Rodgers and Hammerstein for sales of this music is 90%. 90% of the royalties of the music go to Rodgers and Hammerstein. 90.
So she can get just 10%.
Yeah, now she's getting other money because she
still make a chunk of change.
Because also she gets all her performance fees, her concert fees, all that. Rodgers and Hammerstein get nothing of that. So she has other streams of money. It's just the recorded stuff.
Live performances don't count.
Right. So they worked something out. But the real point is, it's a healthy chunk of change goes to Rodgers and Hammerstein. They don't need our $35 anymore. And this comes from nowhere. I mean, you're going, really?
How lucky for them.
How lucky can you get? Talk about Mazel Tov. And the funny thing is that at the end of this discussion, they interview this fellow named Todd Purdom. And you remember the book Something Wonderful that came out recently, Rodgers and Hammerstein on Broadway. And someone said to Todd Purdom, who wrote that book, what would Rodgers and Hammerstein have said about Ariana Grande using this song? And Mr. Purdom said, well, they would have loved the ka-ching of it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you is what they would have said.
Right. So there you go. So that sort of wraps up what we have. And we can't thank enough Pam Bourg, who's our special guest, and has really contributed a lot about all kinds of things. Certainly about nursing, trauma nursing, about skiing, about ski patrol, but mostly about illicit drugs in a way that we would never have gotten anything. I mean, we, of course, know Noelle, your daughter, extremely well. She's never said a word about illicit drugs to us during the entire time.
I would certainly hope not.
I mean, not a word. I mean, I don't think she knows anything about illicit drugs. Actually, if we put it in front of her, she wouldn't know what it was. Smoking a bowl. We said smoking a bowl.
So here's the problem.
What's the problem?
Pam does mention she doesn't come east very often.
Yeah.
And now she's been to Limeport.
Yeah.
The burden is on us to get out to Colorado.
Oh, really?
Which we have not been since
you know something? And
Zeke was
yet
1 year old.
And yet,
so that we have not been out there.
I don't think we've
in
been
almost
invited.
30
Have
years.
we been invited to Colorado? I don't hear any invitation.
I don't think Pam was invited here, and yet she's here.
That's a point. That's a valuable point. Mazel tov. Good point.
All right, so thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
This is Tamsen Granger.
And Dan Abuhoff.
And with
Tamsen.
we'll be back again
Tamsen
next
and
week.
Dan read the paper. Thanks a lot.
Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things. Cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels, doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, silver white winters that melt into spring.